was built. And so we recognize the great privilege and the great opportunity that Jesus has given to us to be faithful and to bear witness to him in 2024 and the ensuing years. We are in cultural upheaval, in a time of cultural crisis. And sometimes we hear this word crisis, and it fills us with hopelessness, and it steals our peace and our freedom. Oh no, it's a time of crisis. What are we going to do? And so I'd like to invite you to journey with me very briefly to ancient Greece. Thousands of years ago in ancient Greece, if we were going to hear the Greeks use the word crisis, they wouldn't necessarily say like the time that a civilization falls. In ancient Greece, thousands of years ago, a crisis was understood to be the moment in an illness that, if you will, is kind of the climactic moment. A moment when either disease is going to ultimately bring about death and demise and destruction, or liberation from disease and healing will take place. And so when I say that we are living in a time of cultural crisis, I'm not saying that America ends tomorrow or next week. But what I am saying is that we are living in a very pivotal moment when the life and the culture of the United States will either become free and healed and well, or it will ultimately meet its demise and die. We are living in a great moment, in a great time of cultural crisis. And so how does Jesus invite his friends and invite his followers and his disciples to respond? Well, I think the answer is Eucharistic revival. Sometimes we can kind of have a high and lofty understanding of what the Eucharist is, and we can almost miss the mark of the highest and greatest responsibility that we have as human beings. If I was going to poll you tonight, I was going to ask you, what's our first and greatest responsibility as human beings? Sometimes we might come up with lots of different answers. The people of St. Michael the Archangel, the parish that has been entrusted in one sense to my care as the assistant pastor there, they don't have it all figured out. So I'm confident the people here at St. Andrews and Gladstone, a little bit wiser, a little bit holier. Your priests are a little bit better priests maybe than we are at St. Michael's. But at St. Michael's, we are still learning, and we do not have it figured out yet. And so if I was going to ask my parishioners at my parish, you know, what's the first and greatest priority of our life? They honestly might say, well, you know, to make money so you can provide for your family. The first and greatest priority of my life is to make sure that I'm seen and noticed and loved so that I can notice and see and love other people. I might just invite you to take stock with me. What is the first and the greatest priority of a human being's life? Well, believe it or not, when God gave us the 10 Commandments, he gave them to us in order. And so, right, the 10 Commandments are not going to stand if we look past the first one. And the first commandment that God gives us is, on Sunday, cheer for the Chiefs. Okay, well, no, that's actually, they didn't exist. Woo, wow. Okay, so on the first commandment, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Brothers and sisters, welcome to America. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. The root word of culture is the word cult. Okay, don't think of the baby horse, that's C-O-L-T. The root word of the word culture, cult, C-U-L-T, is tied to human worship. The heart and the basis and the foundation of every culture is what it chooses to worship. And so, brothers and sisters, we have an opportunity tonight to allow Jesus to hold up a little mirror to us and to allow ourselves to look into it and to ask ourselves honestly the question, what am I worshiping? What does the culture in which I live worship? What does my family choose to worship? And sometimes we kind of give ourselves permission to think like, well, you know, I like the Chiefs, but I don't really worship them. Well, if we are spending more time and money and mental energy on Patrick Mahomes and on the Kansas City Chiefs than we are Jesus of Nazareth, that would be perhaps a sign that we are worshiping them. If we are spending more time and effort focused on the procuration of money than we are of what Jesus has done for us, then it is not Jesus that we worship. It is money. And so I'd like to gently ask you the question tonight, what do you worship? What have you been worshiping? Because the foundation of every culture is what it chooses to worship. And this priest is telling you tonight that we are living in a cultural crisis because many Americans have chosen to reject the worship of Jesus of Nazareth. And so I would like to invite you tonight to recall with me what the Eucharist is. Sometimes we look at the Eucharist and we think, yes, it's God's presence among us. That's amazing. Beautiful. Sometimes we look at the Eucharist and we say, it's a reminder to me every day of what God has done for me. True, absolutely beautiful. But sometimes we forget that Jesus is not just king and victor over all of creation. He is also its eternal priest. And so the Eucharist is the highest and greatest way that humanity is capable of offering right and fitting worship to the true God. And so I'll invite you maybe into this meditation here. When you come to Mass, why do you come to Mass on Sunday? We come to Mass on Sunday to save ourselves from hell, Father. Okay, not a terrible reason, but that's not the first and greatest reason why we come to Mass on Sunday. Why do you come to Mass on Sunday? Because I want grace, Father. Beautiful, an even better reason. But that's not the first and greatest reason why we come to Mass on Sunday. Why do we come to Mass on Sunday? To get the Eucharist, Father. Beautiful reason. But that's not the first and greatest reason why we come to Mass. Because we come to Mass on Sunday. Every time we come to the altar of Jesus, we are not coming as Americans. And if this is how we have been coming, then perhaps this is a moment of conversion for us tonight. We do not come to this altar as Americans. We come to this altar as Christians. What's the difference? American culture forms me to think about me and to ask the question, what's in it for me? What can I get? What can I have? Tell me why I should do this. How will it benefit me? We could have a talk in a parish mission on why we should come to Mass and the benefits of receiving Jesus in the Eucharist. But Jesus, above and before coming to nourish us, he comes to help us fulfill our first and greatest responsibility. And our first and greatest responsibility is to worship the eternal and true God. Jesus, present among us in the Eucharist, is the true and eternal priest of the new covenant, who comes to unite all of creation in the highest and greatest thing that creation is capable of doing. What's the highest and greatest thing creation is capable of doing? Paying Patrick Mahomes. No. What's the highest and greatest thing that creation is capable of doing? Acknowledging that it is not God and that it comes from somewhere. Its existence, my existence, doesn't explain itself. Okay, I told you at the beginning of this talk tonight, Father Luke, associate pastor. Not even a pastor, but you know what? You ask me on a bad day, I make a pretty good armchair pastor. Just ask me. Got it all figured out. Sometimes as a priest, I am pretty good at living in a way that more or less kind of says, Jesus, I got you figured out. I got my vocation figured out. I got the church figured out. I got her theology figured out. I got prayer figured out. Jesus, I went to high school. I went to Catholic high school. I went to Catholic college. I went to seminary. One of your priests. I got it all together, man. And sometimes Jesus looks at me and says, wow, Father Luke, that's impressive. You went to Catholic high school. Oh, wow, a lot of people don't do that. You went to Catholic college, you got multiple graduate degrees. Impressive, Father. Look, you got the moral life figured out. You got prayer figured out. You got all the theology of the church figured out. That's amazing, you little sucker. Father, look, did you create yourself? Are you the cause of your own existence? Did you speak yourself into being? Father Luke, did you lay the foundation for truth at the moment that the universe came into existence? Father Luke, did you place within every human heart an infinite longing to be seen and known and loved? Father Luke, have you placed within humanity a thirst to worship and a desire for infinite happiness? Father Luke, you little sucker, step aside, bud. You don't even have you figured out. But I know you, and I need you. Father Luke, I know your heart better than you know it. Father Luke, believe it or not, I want your happiness more than you want it. And so, Father Luke, are you willing to listen to me? Are you willing to acknowledge me? Are you willing to surrender your mind, your heart, and your life to me? Or will you keep living in a way that says, step aside, Jesus, because I got all this figured out, because I went to Catholic school? Brothers and sisters, Jesus holds up a mirror to us tonight, and he asks us, are you making time to listen to me? You're living in a way that says, you got it all together, you got it all figured out. The first and greatest, actually the highest thing that a human being is intellectually capable of acknowledging is that they are not the cause of their own existence. And if that means that we are not the cause of our own existence, we are not the cause of reality, we did not create the moral order or the law of truth present in the world, if we are not the cause of these things, there is a cause for those things. And the most honest thing that a human being is capable of doing is acknowledging the truth about themselves and the truth about reality, and to go searching for its founder. Because when we find that founder, the highest intellectual thing that we're capable of doing as humans is grasping God, grasping his existence. And the most honest response to this is offering him worship. The oldest city that humanity has consecutively ever lived in, believe it or not Gladstone, Missouri. The oldest city that humanity has consecutively lived in is actually the town of Jericho. And a couple of years ago, there was a survey, an archaeological dig, if you will, that was done in the city of Jericho. And these archaeologists, they just wanted to go down to see, like, what will we find if we go to the earliest dwellings that we can find here in Jericho, the earliest layer of our city. What will we find? And so they cut a shaft in the ground, and they just went down layer after layer after layer, generation after generation after generation. And they went down roughly about 18,000 years. And do you know what they found 18,000 years previously lay underneath Jericho and just the little chute that they happened to cut into the ground? They found an altar. Because throughout the story of humanity, human beings have chosen to acknowledge that they are not the cause of their own existence. Human beings have a supernatural thirst for God and a desire to offer him right worship. The first and greatest responsibility that we have as human beings, our duty and our salvation, is to acknowledge God and to respond with the totality of our lives, offering to him everything in worship. And so, believe it or not, the church prays as she believes. When we gather here at the altar of the Lord at Sunday Mass, right as we journey in as a church to the offering of the Eucharist, to the celebration of the Eucharist, there is a call and response, if you will, a dialogue that the priest shares with his people. So I know that you guys are a little bit holier, a little bit more advanced on this side of the state line than we are in Kansas. So let's see if you know the right answers. The Lord be with you. Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks to the Lord our God. Good job, everybody. Great job. Okay, so what is right and just? The church prays what she believes. Lift up your hearts. We lift them up to the Lord. Let us give thanks to the Lord our God. It is right and just. What is right and just? Giving thanks to the Lord our God. When is God worthy of our thanks? When is the Father worthy of our thanksgiving? When we win the Super Bowl, right? If we lost, man, none of us would have been in church the next day. No. When is God worthy of our thanksgiving? When life's going well, right? When things are easy and things are jiving and I'm really feeling it in prayer, well, then, but also every other time of our life as well. Because we are not the cause of our existence. We are not the cause of the created order of things. And so the church tells us it is truly right and just. It is our duty and our salvation, always and everywhere, to give you thanks. The church prays what she believes, brothers and sisters. The first and greatest reason why we come to Mass on Sunday is not to get something from the altar. It's not to take the Eucharist. The first and greatest reason why we come to Mass on Sunday is to offer the Father worship. That is our first and greatest responsibility as a human race. And so the church prays what she believes. It is our duty, and in it lies our salvation, always and everywhere, to give you thanks. Sometimes we give ourselves permission to worship the Father when life is easy. And in the moment life gets difficult and we lose to the Raiders, we choose not to worship the Father because we have the spiritual maturity of a 6-year-old. Brothers and sisters, have we yet acknowledged that the Father is always worthy of his children's praise and thanksgiving? In the high moments and in the low moments of our lives, in the moments of victory and the moments of defeat, the Father remains good and he remains worthy of the gift of our praise, our thanksgiving, the gift of our worship. Now, if I was going to offer the Father the gift of my praise and the gift of my thanksgiving, he sees that and it delights him. He rejoices in that. But as I told you, I'm just a little sucker, and I don't even have myself figured out. And so when the Father sees my praise and my thanksgiving, that fills his heart with great joy. But my praise and my thanksgiving of the Father is always not perfect. I'm not an infinite being. I don't have it all figured out. I don't have it all together. And so my praise and thanksgiving is beautiful to him, but if you will, it pales in comparison to what we could offer him. And so if we were going to call to mind everything that we have as human beings, what would be the greatest, the most pleasurable thing, the most loving gift that we could offer in worship to God? The gift of our life is a really beautiful gift, but we're not infinite. We're not the source of all goodness and truth. We don't have it all together. And so the gift of our life is immensely pleasing to the Father, but it's not the greatest thing that we could offer him. What's the greatest good, the greatest gift that we could ever offer to God the Father? The Lombardi Trophy. That's right. No. Okay, come on. What's the greatest gift that we could offer to the Father? The greatest thing that he has given us. And the greatest thing that he has given us is the greatest thing that he is capable of giving us. I don't know if you've ever thought about Jesus in that way, that you've ever considered the Eucharist in that vein, in that lens. That this is not just a great gift from God. This isn't just an amazing thing that God would give to his children. This is actually the greatest way that he can express his love. What's more powerful than Jesus? Nothing. What's more holy than Jesus? Nothing. What's more beautiful than Jesus? Nothing. What's more valuable than him? Nothing. And so the greatest gift that humanity could ever receive is the greatest gift that it has received. What does that tell you about what God the Father thinks of you? That the highest and greatest way he could show you that your life and your story and your brokenness and your sin and all those things matter to him, he has done, and he has shown us. He has sent his Son, the Word of life, into this world, who was born thousands of years ago on that beautiful Christmas night. The presence of Jesus has never left. I don't know if you've ever considered that before. That night when he was born, actually 9 months previously, on March the 25th, the Feast of the Annunciation, when the Son of God entered into the story of his people and took up his dwelling among men, he never left. Well, Father, he was crucified, he died, and he ascended, and he went back up to heaven. Yes, he did. But didn't he leave us something that is the totality of his presence? And so God is incapable of giving the world more of himself than he has already given her in the gift of the Eucharist. Genesis begins with the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve who were made to eat of the fruit of the tree of life. And Adam and Eve who in their self-reliance and their pride rejected the Father and walked with great confidence away from him. Adam and Eve who even in the midst of their rejection and walking away from the Father remained his sons and daughters and remained worthy of his love. The Eucharist is the means by which God the Father brings his sons and daughters back to Eden. The Eucharist is the fruit that hangs upon the tree of life. It is the flesh and the blood, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of the eternal high priest, who offers the Father the greatest worship that he is capable of receiving. Because Jesus, the greatest gift that has ever been given by the Father to us, is the eternally good Son of the Father. The only person capable of giving the Father infinite love and infinite praise and infinite adoration is his Son. And so if he has given us his Son, then the highest gift that we can present to the Father is Jesus. And so the first and greatest reason why we come to Mass on Sunday is to follow the eternal high priest as he leads his people in the most perfect and true act of religion that the world is capable of offering, as we offer our lives with Jesus to the Father. And so that's how the Eucharistic prayer begins, with that dialogue. And the priest reminds us it is truly right and just. It is man's duty, and in it lies his salvation, always and everywhere, to offer the Father the gift of thanks and of praise. When do I offer God the gift of my thanks? When do I offer the Father the gift of my adoration and my praise? Sometimes, if we're going to be honest at this part of the Eucharistic prayer, at least at St. Michael's, you're holier on this side, but at least at St. Michael's, it's hard not to notice sometimes that when we enter into this Eucharist, this dialogue right before the beginning of the Eucharistic prayer, some of my spiritual sons and daughters have seen maybe you're thinking about the game later that afternoon. Perhaps they're making their parking lot exit strategy rather than preparing to worship, to do the highest and greatest thing a human being is capable of doing. When I come to Mass, especially during the liturgy of the Eucharist, do I have an awareness that what is happening before my eyes is the highest and greatest thing that a human being is capable of doing? Or am I just kind of sitting on my hands waiting to get something, to finally have a reason why I came to Mass? We do not come to Mass as Americans. We come to Mass as Christians, followers of the eternal high priest who allowed him to lead us in a perfect act of praise and thanksgiving to the Father. And so the Eucharistic prayer begins with this dialogue. How does the Eucharistic prayer end? Through him, with him, and in him. In the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours, Almighty Father, forever and ever. The reason why we come to Mass is because Jesus makes it possible through the Eucharist for us to worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And so we have an incredible opportunity before us at this altar on every Sunday, every day of the week actually, to allow our confusion, our anxiety, our fear, our self-reliance, the idols that we worship. This is a beautiful invitation and opportunity for us to place those at the altar of the true God and allow them to be crushed. What keeps me from worshiping God in spirit and in truth? Well, if I was going to interview my spiritual children at St. Michael the Archangel, they would often name one of the false gods that Israel for thousands of years has fallen into the false worship of. You know, back in ancient Israelite history, the Israelites often struggled with idols, pagan gods. One of the most famous pagan gods in the Old Testament was a god by the name of Baal. And we're going to be honest, if I was going to ask a lot of my spiritual sons and daughters why they aren't able to come to Mass on Sunday and to worship the Father in spirit and in truth, it's because they have a more important God that they're worshiping that Sunday. And that God's name is Baal. The enemy does not need to come up with any new temptations because the children of God fall for the old ones again and again and again. Father, we couldn't worship at the altar of the true God this weekend. We had volleyball. Father, yes, Jesus is really nice and accepting and merciful and loving, but I had football. And so I did my worship at Arrowhead Stadium this Sunday. That's the same, isn't it? We want to be very aware, brothers and sisters, of what we worship, because ultimately God allows his children to receive what they worship. And so when I choose to worship what is ultimately nothing, God will allow me to have nothing. When I choose to worship truth and freedom and mercy and healing and life, that opens me to receive those things, the person who is that in my life. And so the question that this Eucharistic revival presents to the American church is, what and who is she worshiping? The highest and greatest way that God can show us that our story matters to him is by giving us everything and giving us Jesus, his son, present in the Eucharist. But that demands a response on our part. What or who am I choosing to worship? The reason why we are in a cultural crisis is because the culture of the United States of America has chosen to leave the worship of the true God and to present itself to worship all kinds of different false gods, whether it's the God of pride, of money, of Instagram, of being seen and noticed and praised and honored by the world, whatever that is. I would encourage you to pray tonight and to ask Jesus to help you see what are the idols that Lord Jesus